A stranger said, "Please pretend you're my girlfriend for 60 seconds. So I did, but that fake date turned into something real, until I learned why he chose me. It was just past 8:30 p.m. when Rachel Carter stepped out of the hospital, her body aching from another back-to-back shift in the ER. The scrubs clung uncomfortably to her skin after 12 hours of non-stop movement, traumas, and not a moment to eat anything but half a protein bar between emergencies. She could practically hear her shower calling her name. Downtown Portland buzzed softly with evening life as she waited at the crosswalk, zoning out to the blinking red hand that refused to change. She was thinking about nothing in particular. Maybe the dinner she wouldn't cook or the email she'd ignore again, when a man in a charcoal gray suit cut diagonally across the street, phone in hand, eyes darting. Then, he stopped right in front of her. "Please," he said under his breath, just loud enough to reach her. "Just walk with me and pretend you're my girlfriend. I'll explain, just 60 seconds. Rachel blinked. "What?" But there wasn't time. Across the street, a tall woman in heels and a champagne-colored dress stepped out of a restaurant, scanning the sidewalk. The man didn't wait for an answer. His hand landed gently at the small of Rachel's back, and before she could say a word, they were crossing the street together. He leaned in and spoke clearly but softly. "That's my ex-fiancée's sister. Long story. Just play along for a second." Rachel could have pulled away. She should have. But something in his tone, not desperate, not dramatic, just quietly urgent, made her go along. Maybe it was the kind of shift she'd had. Maybe she was just too tired to argue. As they reached the woman, he introduced Rachel with a calmness that didn't match the situation. "Hi, Claire," he said, flashing a quick smile. "This is Rachel, my girlfriend." Claire gave Rachel a polite once-over, then smiled thinly. "Oh, nice to meet you. It's been a while, Eli." "Yeah," he replied. "It has." There was a pause, one of those long, awkward ones that makes everyone overly polite. Then Claire excused herself and headed back toward her group inside the restaurant. Rachel turned to him. "Okay, that was weird." "I know," he said, exhaling in relief. "Thank you. I'm sorry for dragging you into that. I didn't plan it, I swear." "Clearly," she said, folding her arms, still standing on the sidewalk with him. "I was just supposed to be meeting a colleague, but when I saw her, Claire, I panicked. I couldn't let her think I was still stuck on everything that happened." "You could have just ignored her." "Yeah, I could have. But instead, I dragged a stranger into it. I'm sorry." She studied him for a moment. He looked like the kind of guy who never missed a meeting. The kind who kept his suit jacket pressed and his email inbox zeroed out. But right now, he looked tired in a way she recognized. "I'm Eli," he offered. "Eli Whitman. Rachel Carter. Nurse." He looked at her for a moment longer. "You're probably busy. But if it makes this any less weird, would you let me buy you dinner?" She should have said no. Every part of her routine-minded, logic-first brain screamed that this was random, irresponsible, maybe even a little reckless. But something about the interruption, the way he looked like someone trying to outrun their own past, felt oddly familiar. She checked her watch, then looked up at him. "One drink. Then I go home." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, but he nodded. "Fair." 15 minutes later, Rachel was seated inside the kind of restaurant she usually passed without noticing. The wine was better than anything she bought for herself in years. And across from her sat the man who had just used her as a prop to impress someone who barely knew her name. And yet, there she was, sipping her drink, not entirely hating the interruption. The menu was full of dishes Rachel couldn't pronounce. The tablecloth was crisp white. The water came in a glass bottle instead of a pitcher. She hadn't been somewhere like this in years, probably not since her sister's engagement party. Across from her, Eli looked both relieved and mildly embarrassed. He'd finally stopped checking over his shoulder, and after the waiter took their order, scallops for him, roasted eggplant ravioli for her, he leaned back with a sigh. "I meant it when I said I'd cover dinner," he said. "This was a huge ask out of nowhere. I don't do this sort of thing." "Clearly," Rachel replied, lips curling just slightly. "But you don't seem like a creep, and I've had worse reasons for a night out." He smiled, but not in that overly confident way some men did. It was quieter than that. Tired, like someone who had forgotten what it felt like to sit across from someone and not talk about work. "So," she said, taking a sip of wine. "What happened? Why the emergency fake date?" Eli paused for a second. "We were engaged for 4 years. Claire's sister, Marissa, left 9 months ago. It was messy." Rachel didn't ask for details. She'd learned at the hospital that people tend to spill what they need to when they're ready. Instead, she let the silence hang for a beat. He continued, I don't know. Seeing Claire just brought it all up. And the idea of her reporting back that I'm still alone, still wearing the same suit, it made me feel small. Pathetic, even. Which is dumb, I know. It's not dumb, she said quietly. You wanted to save face. I get that. She wasn't sure why she did. But she did. Maybe it was the way he said it. No drama, no self-pity. Just honesty. Dinner came, and surprisingly, it didn't feel awkward. Their conversation drifted from serious to silly without much effort. She found out he'd spent a year in Denver before law school, loved crossword puzzles, and had a bizarre fear of escalators, too many moving parts. She told him about the ER, about the night shift that had left her walking around Portland like a ghost, about how her apartment felt more like a storage unit than a home these days. You ever take time off? He asked. Not really. Doesn't feel like there's a good time. That's what I tell myself too, he said. But maybe that's just another excuse to not deal with anything real. The conversation lasted hours. The restaurant started to empty. Eventually, they realized how late it had gotten and stepped out into the soft coolness of a Portland night. As they walked toward her car, he handed her his business card. I won't be offended if you throw this away. But I meant it. Thank you for tonight. She took the card. No promises. Just a quiet nod. Good luck with Claire and escalators. 2 days later, Rachel was halfway through charting patient notes when a volunteer nurse walked into the staff lounge, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. For you, the girl said with a grin. Rachel furrowed her brow. You sure? The card inside read, this time, dinner without pretending. Friday at 7. Eli. She read it twice. Then again. A tiny spark fluttered in her chest, nothing dramatic. But real. Rachel hadn't planned on seeing him again. The evening was supposed to be a story she'd tell once and forget. But maybe, just maybe, life wasn't supposed to stay on autopilot forever. Rachel almost didn't go. The Friday shift had been long, 2 back-to-back trauma cases, a malfunctioning vitals monitor, and one family meltdown in the hallway that left her emotionally wiped. By the time she got home, she had 40 minutes to decide. Shower and show up, or cancel and pretend the whole sunflower incident never happened. She almost canceled. She even drafted the text. *Hey Eli, I've had a long day and I think I'm going to pass on tonight. Sorry again for the fake date rescue, though *. But she didn't send it. Instead, she stood in front of her closet staring at clothes she hadn't worn in months. She picked something comfortable, nothing fancy. Just a soft sweater, clean jeans, and a little mascara to hide the exhaustion under her eyes. The cafe he picked was simple. Local. The kind of place that served pour-over coffee and had a book exchange shelf in the corner. Nothing like the first date. No lies. No performances. He stood as she walked in. I was half convinced you wouldn't show. I almost didn't, she admitted, sliding into the seat. But I figured I owed you at least one real hello. He smiled. I'll take it. They talked for an hour. Then another. And then 3. There was nothing grand about it, just warmth. She told him about the teenage patient who made her laugh that morning despite his fractured arm, and he talked about a case he was dropping because it didn't sit right with him ethically. They didn't try to impress each other. Over the next few weeks, their meetings became part of her routine, but in a way that didn't feel forced. Sometimes, they walked around the city after her night shifts with takeout in hand. Other nights, they'd talk on the phone until one of them started dozing off mid-sentence. He never pushed, never made it dramatic, just always showed up. One morning, after a particularly chaotic night in the ER, she found him waiting outside her apartment building holding 2 coffees and a bag of bagels. Thought I'd intercept you before you went full zombie. She hadn't laughed that hard in weeks. 3 months passed. That's when he suggested it. A weekend on the Oregon coast. No pressure, a tiny rental cabin, and no emails allowed. She stared at the calendar. She hadn't taken personal time in almost 3 years. But she said yes. It rained the first night. They played cards inside and ate cheap Chinese food while wrapped in mismatched blankets. The next morning, the sun broke through, and they walked barefoot along Cannon Beach, her pants rolled up, his jacket tight around her shoulders. They watched kids feed seagulls with crumpled fries. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. At one point, sitting on a bench, she turned to him and said, It's still wild to me that all this started with a fake date. He glanced at her, eyes soft. Sometimes the best things start with the wrong reasons. She didn't respond right away. The truth was, she'd been holding back. Not because she didn't like him, but because she was scared of how easy it had become to picture him in her life, not just next to it. Eventually, she exhaled. I think I forgot what it felt like to be someone outside of the hospital. You reminded me. They stayed like that. Quiet, watching the sea foam curl along the shore. Rachel didn't know where this would go. Maybe it would fizzle out, maybe not. But something about the whole thing, the accident of meeting, the timing, the unpredictability, felt more real than anything she'd planned for herself in a long time. Sometimes, we build routines to survive. And sometimes, someone walks into our life, unexpected, uninvited, and reminds us how to live.